Next, from Springfield, our one-on-one interview with NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen. We ask him about the future of NATO and what impact the European budget crisis is having on NATO's ability to maintain an effective military. This runs about 8 minutes.
Anders Fogh Rasmussen, Secretary General, thank you for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
It's my pleasure.
We just heard you deliver a speech here in Springfield, Illinois, and you talked about personal diplomacy and your time coming to the United States as a young man. I'm curious, now that you've risen to be the head of NATO, how did that experience, you must have had some impressions of America before you came. How did that trip here in America affect those impressions that you had? And today, how does it still have any impact on how you view America when you do your job as the NATO Secretary General?
Yes, indeed. I grew up in a strong pro-American family. So I arrived in the United States with a very positive image of the United States. That positive attitude was only reinforced during my stay here. I visited families. I established friendships with Americans during that trip, and it gave me a very strong impression of American society and way of life, and that has been a strong platform for me ever since.
I know I traveled around Europe when I was a young man, and we're about the same age, and I was struck that sometimes Europeans, I think, didn't understand America and what motivated America. We were talking back then about the Vietnam War, and I think it led to misperceptions about what was driving U.S. foreign policy. So I can see where having a better understanding of how America thinks is probably very important.
Exactly, and to avoid such misperceptions, it is of utmost importance to strengthen people-to-people contacts. And this is exactly what the international visitor programs are about. I consider these international visitor programs a crucial investment in an improved intercultural understanding.
I want to talk a little bit about NATO and the future of NATO, but first, for those who may not really know what NATO is, tell us, what is NATO?
NATO is a military alliance consisting of 28 nations, including the United States as a very big ally, and Canada. So Canada and the United States from North America, together with 26 democracies in Europe. And these 28 nations form the world's strongest military alliance. But it is much more than a military alliance. It's also what I would call a community of values. Nations that share the same common values: individual liberty, democracy, the rule of law. NATO was established in 1949 in the Second World War, and NATO constitutes the framework for a strong transatlantic cooperation between the United States and Canada, from North America and Europe.
What's interesting is that now, we used to have, when we were growing up, the Warsaw Pact nations, and we had the NATO against the Warsaw Pact. Now a number of those countries who were once allied with the Soviet Union are now part of NATO. I believe Poland is, and maybe the Baltic countries, which is fascinating. I also find fascinating, we talked just a little bit before, about a year ago, last summer of 2011, I was watching television and saw you talking to the European press regarding the military action that was being taken place against Libya and trying to rid Muammar Gaddafi. I found it, as an American, almost shocking to see a European leader talking about military action, because I think one of the critiques that many Americans had over the years is that we never got help from our allies, or at least not to the extent. Now that, with the Libyan experience, let's talk about, to what extent is Europe ready to take military action when needed to help preserve world order? And to what extent is the Libyan example an example of how future military action might take place?
Actually, I think our operation in Libya is a positive story of European commitment to our alliance and European willingness to take leadership. The fact is that our Libya operation is the first NATO operation in the history of our alliance where European allies, together with Canada, provided the majority of assets. We know very well that we couldn't have conducted that operation so successfully without a significant input from the United States. But the fact is that Europeans took the lead. And that's a positive story, and it could be a model also in the future. And I'm strongly in favor of what I call fair burden sharing between the United States and the other allies. And in that respect, the Libya operation could serve as a good example.
There's so many things to talk about, but we only have limited time. Let me ask, relative to the future, given the European debt crisis that we see now, how much of a threat is that to the ability to keep an active military presence for NATO?
I would call it a challenge. And of course, the economic crisis has an impact on our alliance because all ministers of defense are faced with declining, or almost all ministers are faced with declining defense budgets. But actually, we addressed that at the recent NATO summit in Chicago and adopted a defense package which will serve to make more efficient use of our defense money. So we can't expect much more money for defense in the coming years, but we can make more efficient use of the money we have. And the way to do that is to help each other, to cooperate, to go for multinational projects instead of purely national solutions. We call it smart defense because it's a smarter way of spending money, pooling and sharing of resources. And we have launched a number of projects, through smart defense we will be able to provide the necessary military assets in the future despite declining defense budgets.
Mr. Secretary General, we appreciate you joining us. I know your time is short, but thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.